If you've not done a lot of mixing, or you've only mixed in one place, then you might wonder what it's like in other venues. Your first time in a new venue can be quite stressful if you don't know what kind of equipment to expect. But thankfully, most venues operate in a really similar way. I'll guide you through all of the gear that you're likely to encounter in a new venue. We're going to cover speakers and their amplifiers, we're going to cover mixers and their connections, and we're going to cover microphones and when to use them, and everything that links all of that together. You'll walk into your next venue feeling prepared to deliver the great mix that you know you can. You might run into a Dante network in your next venue. If you need help getting to grips with Dante, check out my free Dante cheat sheet. I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. Let's dive in. Starting with the obvious, every music venue is going to have speakers, but these speakers can fall into two categories. You might have active speakers and you might have passive speakers. Active speakers have the amplifier built into them. What does that mean for you coming into a new venue? If you are trying to connect a mixer up to your active speaker system, or if you are trying to trace the signal flow to find where it gets to the speaker system, you're looking to follow XLR cables that come out of your mixer or out of your stage box and follow them until they go into a speaker. It's quite likely that when you go into one speaker, you will come out of a link output of that speaker and go into a sub or something similar to that. You can watch my video up here about setting up a simple speaker system if you want to know more about that. On the other hand, you're going to come across passive speakers. Passive speakers have the amplifiers housed outside of the speaker enclosure itself. Usually you find these in a rack next to the stage, usually next to the stage box. In some cases you might find that rack at front of house, though I've mostly come across it next to the stage or in a dedicated rack room at the back. What you need to think about here is that your XLR that comes out of your mixer with your mix is going to go into the amplifier first, and then the amplifier is going to raise the signal level up to speaker level, and it will come out of that amplifier on a speak-on cable, which is then connected into the speakers. It can get a little bit more complicated with DSP amplifiers and with bi-amping and things like that, but you should at least be aware of how the signal flows. The third thing that's a wild card in this situation is DSP. And if you don't know, DSP just stands for digital signal processing. It is often a standalone unit which distributes the audio out to either the amplifiers or to the active speakers itself. What happens is that the signal comes out of your mixer, your left-right, and it goes into the input 1 and 2 on your DSP. Inside your DSP, we have the capability to split that signal up and cross over if it's going to subs or certain amplifiers, control the volume, the EQ, the delay, and send it further onto the speakers. You should just have that in the back of your head, that if you are tracing the signal flow from your mixer to your speakers, you might be going into a standalone DSP box, which then splits the signal out into multiple different pathways. All of this holds true for monitors as well. If you have monitor wedges on the stage, they can be either active or passive. If they're active, you'll need to get a power cable out to them as well as a signal cable on XLR. If they are passive, then there will be a dedicated amplifier for those monitor wedges, and you will need to get your send out of your mixer into that amplifier. In my experience, venues with active systems are usually a little modular, and you might end up dragging out speakers and connecting them up every time you're at work, whereas passive systems often are just permanent installs, and you just take the speaker out and grab a speak-on cable, and everything is patched already from the desk to the amplifiers for the speakers or to the amplifiers for the wedges. That brings us on to the second thing that you're definitely going to find in a venue, and that is a mixer. Most mixers nowadays are digital, but you might still find analog mixers. But ultimately, every mixer is more or less built the same. You've got inputs for microphones, and you have outputs where you send either your finished mix to the speakers, or you're sending mixes out to each individual monitor. Here's where things can get complicated. With an analog mixer, you always plug your microphone cables into the back of the mixer. That's the only way to get the microphone signal into the analog mixer. On a digital mixer, you might be able to connect all of your microphones into the back of the mixer, like on an X32 or M32 or something like that. But you also have the possibility for digital stage boxes. These are boxes containing lots of microphone inputs and XLR outputs, which are linked to the mixer using a CAT cable, using a network cable. What that means is we can take one little cable and we can get all of the signals back and forward to the stage without having to drag a really heavy multi-core cable. The caveat with the digital stage boxes is that they operate on a certain digital protocol, so you cannot mix and match digital stage boxes. If you're using a Midas mixer, you need to use a Midas stage box. If you're using a Yamaha mixer, you need to use a Yamaha stage box. There are some caveats to this, but treat that as a rule. You could, of course, still run into analog stage boxes. You might come across an analog stage box which runs XLR lines just from the stage to the back of your mixer, old school style. It's more likely that you'll run into an analog stage box which is performing sort of breakout function on the stage, is dividing the stage into zones. So you have your digital stage box at the side of the stage, which is your main interface to your mixer, between your mixer and the stage. But then you might have two breakout boxes, two analog stage boxes, which give you perhaps the far side of the stage and maybe the front of the stage. Or maybe one goes to the drum kit, so you can connect all the microphones up for the drum kit there. And maybe another one goes to the front of the stage, so you can connect all of the vocals up there. I'll leave a link up here to a video about stage boxes. If this video was useful so far, I would love it if you could hit the subscribe button. I've got loads of other videos, tips and tricks for being the best live sound engineer you can be. Back to the video. The third thing that you're definitely going to run into in every venue is microphones, or methods of getting sound in and out of your mixer. You might think, what type of microphones is the venue going to have? But in my experience, it's very, very predictable, right? Every venue is going to have some microphones for vocal mics, right? Often, this is going to be a Shure SM58. It might be a Shure Beta 58. It might be a Sennheiser E835, if that's the right number. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they're going to have some microphones for vocals. They might also have something slightly fancier for different kinds of vocals. That could be a DPA de facto, or it could be a Shure KSM9. These are condenser microphones that are a little more sensitive, and they also have supercardioid pickup patterns, I think. But essentially, it's just two different flavors of vocal microphones for you to pick from. The next thing that every venue is going to have, if they're running music, is a selection of instrument microphones. And they will usually have microphones which are dedicated to certain instruments. You're going to find an all-rounder like the Shure SM57. That's going to be in basically every single venue. And you can use that on lots of things, from guitar cabs to brass and even vocals, snare drums, all sorts of stuff. You're also going to come across these dedicated microphones like Shure Beta 52, which is a kick drum microphone. Beta 91, almost ubiquitously used inside of the kick drum microphone. Alternatives could be Audix D6 or Sennheiser 602 or the AKG D112, something like that. You also find clip-on microphones for the toms. The quintessential one is the E904 by Sennheiser. It's a clip-on mic. You can also get the 604, very, very similar microphones. You get front address microphones for guitar cabinets, the 906s by Sennheiser, or 609s. Again, two very similar microphones. And you will also find some sort of small diaphragm condenser mic, which is useful for miking up hi-hats, percussion, overheads as the drum kit. Essentially, what I'm trying to get at is that if you understand how to use a very small selection of microphones, you are going to be prepared for all microphones that you come across basically ever. And if you come across something you don't understand, you just Google the manual. The last thing you'll come across then in the input-output section is, of course, DI boxes. DI boxes are used to turn instrument-level signals into microphone-level signals so that we can plug them into our stage box, which is looking for a microphone-level signal, and obviously ultimately get it into our mixer and mix it. That's a kind of gross simplification of what they do, but I think a lot of people just think about them as turning jacks into XLRs, which is not strictly true. But a general rule of thumb is if you have something on a jack and you plug it into a DI box and put it on an XLR, you're going to be in the clear. Whereas if you start grabbing jacks and plugging them straight into your mixer, you could run into a problem. I won't get into it. I've got a video somewhere about DI boxes, and if I don't, I'll make one. You're going to run into two main types, passive and active DI boxes. Again, gross simplification, but passive DI boxes are good for active signals. So if it's a high signal level, you want to put it into a passive DI box because it's a lower sensitivity and it will tolerate the higher signal better. Vice versa, if you have a low signal, something like an acoustic guitar or passive pickups coming out of a guitar, then you might want to go into an active DI box. It is more complicated than that, but these are general rules that you can use to get started and feel confident walking into a venue. You also might find stereo versions of these DI boxes, and yes, you can just use half of a stereo DI box as one channel. This should give you a pretty broad idea of what's in a venue. Obviously, you'll find microphone cables, jack cables, and things like that as well, but this is the core of every single venue. So leave a comment down below and let me know if this was useful to you or what your venue has that I have forgotten to mention. I'll leave a video up here about my strategy for mixing drums that you might find interesting. Until next time, goodbye.